Technology is like an amplifier and it mirrors our ethical stance. The only difference is that it is highly scalable, it is fast, and it makes it more powerful as well as dangerous. Many organizations now understand that you can have a competitive advantage in chatbot economy if you have high ethical capacity. But the mere existence of ethical guidelines cannot guarantee that it can steer through ethical dilemmas and questions. You need practical frameworks, that's necessary. And there is a difference between having a quality management policy and having a quality management framework that people can use. The same applies to technology ethics. Understanding the chatbot ecosystem from a systems perspective can become a significant advantage for you as a contributor. But when it comes to technology ethics, people often have different connotations. While some people think it is about AI ethics, some people call it ethical AI, while some think it is all about responsible AI, and some think it is just about tech ethics. I think it is all about these things. But more importantly, it is about being considerate. As a tech contributor, as a developer, architect, project manager, CTO, or anyone playing an important role in this ecosystem, you must be considerate. You have to be considerate because ultimately you have the power. I remember as a kid when we moved from small village to a big city, and it was the first time I got to see cars, big vehicles. I always marveled at how those cars work. So I asked my father about that. I asked him, how do people drive cars just with the steering wheel? He said, no, it is not just the steering wheel. There are several other parts that help in driving the car. So then he went on explaining me how the accelerator, brake and clutch work together. But I had this pesky little question. Why do we need brakes? And he said the function of the brake is to slow down the car, but the purpose is to enable it go faster. Brakes in the car do not slow it down. They enable the car to go faster. Try to imagine driving a car that has no brakes. I'm sure you won't be able to drive that faster. And that is what happening with technology for past several years. There have been too many companies that have applied the motto of move fast and break things. We have broken enough things on social terms, political or democratic terms, environmental terms. And I think only having a quality policy or corporate governance policy is not going to be useful. It's not going to be helpful. We need more than that. And even more when it comes to chatbot ecosystem, we need solid foundation. Every day you see new chatbots are coming out, and every time that happens, we solve some problems and create new ones. Think about it. If a salesperson is selling you something by overpromising, you could potentially sue them for mis-selling. But if a chatbot does that to you, who would you sue? And therefore, the key question is, what does it take to develop a great product? How do you develop a great solution that is sustainable, technologically more responsible, and ethical? And in my view, there are three key aspects that any solution must cover to tick all these boxes. The first aspect is quite fundamental. Every solution, every chatbot must be designed with the right thing in mind. It must do the right thing. Now, because most technologies do want to do the right thing, it's not an issue. The second key aspect here is doing it right. And fortunately, there is enough information available on internet or at different conferences. Even at this conference, you will hear several best practices and case studies to get chatbot things right. Now, here is the third factor that most of the businesses miss. It is covering all the risks. Many people who try to do it always conflate this thing with business risk or financial risk. But actually, we also need to cover unintended consequences. So, when you cover all these three aspects of a good solution design, you will get a real five-star product. Now, when it comes to implementing these aspects, I have seen people giving a lot of attention to having a policy, governance policy, risk management policy, etc. And I believe it is not just the policy that we need actionable framework, a framework that every single individual in your team, in your technology team can use. When I used to work with banks, and I did work with quite a few, every time there was a money laundering case, people held banks responsible. Not that banks were complicit. In most cases, almost all cases, they were never complicit. They were never been the part of the total this money laundering by intention, but the machinery that they built, the infrastructure that they built, did contribute to these lapses, and it did enable money laundering in the first instance. And that is why people blame banks for not having the framework, not having those controls. And I think now with the chatbot ecosystem, you have this responsibility to establish actionable measures, enable the technologists to deploy those measures in their day to day work. That's where I think implementing the ethical measures and considerations into product design itself are important. Because it makes little to no sense to improve a product after it has gone out and caused certain damage. I mean, why wait for that time if you can fix something, anticipate it, and fix it beforehand? To enable you to do that effectively, I recommend one tool, Premortem Analysis. It is exact opposite of postmortem. So if you have watched air crash investigations, you would know that there is usually an accident and then they go out finding what happened, why did it happen, what was the chain of activities, what went wrong. Then it is followed by recommendations as to what needs to be done to avoid this kind of accident later. Sometimes it's too late. If we apply pre-mortem analysis, which is pretty sophisticated in terms of identifying issues well in advance and fixing them as many as possible, it can enable you to implement technology to your solution in a considerate manner. Now let's understand how the chatbot or any technology development usually progresses. So here we have six steps in which it goes through. We start from the design phase to training our system, then we have data collection with training data coming in, then we train system again, then we deploy this system, then we start using the system, we are our users, and then the feedback starts to come in, which then goes back into training, and we keep refining this system. You can apply pre-mortem analysis in each of those six stages, independently and collectively. I still remember a story from one of the Australian telcos that lost about $11 million on incorrectly designing and deploying a technology. Only if they had used pre-mortem analysis, I'm certain they would have saved all that money. In pre-mortem, you ask three critical questions. At first, you list down all the process steps, all the solution steps, all the functions that your chatbot or your technology is doing, and then check function by function. Ask these questions. The first question you want to ask is, what are the problems that could occur as a result of this particular step or a function? And if that problem happens, how bad could it be? What's the severity of something going wrong with this function? Would it be lethal, hazardous, then it is 10? Would it be mere annoyance, then it is 1? Similarly, you also want to go and ask second question regarding the occurrence, such as how often this failure might occur. Will it occur every time? Then it's 10. Will it occur sparingly? Then it is 1. But when it comes to detection, we use a reverse scale. And it is reverse because higher detection means you can detect the problem early on, which enables you, it puts you in a better position to fix it earlier. So if something goes wrong, can you detect it? Can you detect it easily? And if the answer is yes, you get 1. But if you cannot detect it easily, if it has to go through the entire cycle, then the user has to report back with the problem. Then damage is already done. Then the detection is lowest. The rating goes to 10. All three ratings can then be multiplied together and they give you a risk score. This risk score is also called as risk priority number for every step. So now you know which step, which function, which feature in your chatbot are more critical than others. And when you know it, you can focus on them, apply some control measures to fix issues beforehand. You don't have to wait for something to go wrong because now you have found out. Doing this analysis will enable you to gain a very high level of confidence in your solution. It's not only about doing things right, it's not only about doing the thing right, it is also about covering all the risks. And that's where you can raise your tech ethics quotient. Now, there might be a question that most of you might be asking or wanting to ask, that if I have to do all this, won't it slow down my development? Won't it stifle the innovation? But remember, brakes in the car do not slow it down, they enable it to go faster. Doing all this analysis is not going to slow it down, but it will enable you, it will help you to move faster, innovate better without having unintended consequences of your solution. You see, when I work with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs, I get a feel that and a vibe that a lot of people are wanting to work with companies that have some social connection, got some high ethical quotient. That's where I believe every organization with a high ethical capacity will have that competitive advantage in coming future. And you could develop this advantage. You could develop and improve this ethical quotient if you develop technology right. And that is why I keep saying that it is on you to build that technology right. When you look back 3 to 5 years from now and you look back and see what you have done, what you have developed, you should be proud of it. Remember, technology always brings us two things. It brings us a promise, the promise of prosperity and growth. And it also brings us consequences, mostly unintended consequences. And it is the consequences that we must be worried about, be careful about, because ultimately you are an individual contributor to this tech economy, and that is why you have to be considerate. So be considerate because you have the power.